In the wake of Phil Collins releasing his first solo album, Genesis takes a decidedly more pop approach to their music as we discuss their 1981 album, Abacab. Stay with us. Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Your weekly excursion into the minds of two people that have nothing else to think about but music and movies.
That is
and the
correct.
same music and movies that we always just talk about. But we're trying. We're trying new stuff.
No, we're trying. But hey,
give
what's
it the old college try.
Yeah, right.
But when we get too nervous, we go back to our comfort zone of 1981.
Yes, we do. And what a year it was.
What a year it was. So we're heading back there. But if you're new to our show, well, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you. We really do appreciate any new listeners that stop by, even if you drop in for 10 or 15 minutes. That's okay. Just be quiet on your way out. Just don't make any noise, and it'll be fine. It'll be all right.
Yeah.
We'll give you a hall pass. Go to the bathroom. Come on back. Just don't make any noise when you open the door again as well. And you can find us on social media, 3324 Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. But more as important, I almost said more importantly, but it's not. It's as important.
Mm-hmm.
Go find us on YouTube. We've got a great channel. We upload the video versions of these episodes as well. You could check that out too. Give those videos a like and a subscribe to our channel, and also throw a comment in there too. We reply to the comments too.
Yeah.
So, that's the advertisements. We don't have any sponsors, so we have to. We're our own sponsor.
Yeah, Dean has to do the shilling.
So there's your ad. No more ads until we get to the very end.
And then we do it all over again.
Unless we stop in the middle and say, "Hey, by the way," but we're not going to do that. When we get a real sponsor, we'll be popping them.
Yeah, most assuredly, people will probably be getting up to go to the bathroom then. Okay, yeah, they're going to go through this.
Well, in this day and age, if you know what? In this day and age, you take that phone with you and you continue to listen. All right? If you're
imagine that,
it won't get flagged as in Seinfeld.
Oh goodness, yeah.
Right? Let's be honest. If you've got your cell phone, it goes everywhere with you.
Yep.
Right. I've been in public restrooms, and you hear
full disclosure. Yeah.
You hear people
absolutely.
talking on the phone. You hear people watching, Netflix
right
in the stall. I mean, let's be honest. It's the way it's only replicating what we do at home.
Right.
It's no different. So let's, it's true. Come on.
We're in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Oh, how far we've fallen. We're talking
and how quickly we got there. It's not only the length we've fallen, but how fast we achieved that.
Right.
We're just breaking all matters of time and space in our descent.
Absolutely.
So let's put the brakes on it a little bit. Let's reconvene and re-adjourn. We came here to talk about it. A great album, one of our favorites.
Oh yeah.
This one goes way back to our early days of getting into music. So let's roll the stats out on Abacab.
Mm-hmm.
Released in September of 1981. This was actually the second album of the 80s for Genesis. They'd put out Duke the year before, 1980, like March of 1980.
Right.
This was produced by Genesis with some help of Hugh Padgham engineering. Officially he was the engineer.
Mm-hmm.
It hit number 7 on the Billboard charts. This was their first album, Genesis's first album to crack the top 10 on the Billboard. So that was a big accomplishment for them. It went 2 times platinum, which was 2 million copies. Nicely done, gentlemen. 4 singles released. Abacab, title track, hit number 26. No Reply at All hit number 29. Keep It Dark was a UK release single, so it didn't really chart here. Oddly enough, Man on the Corner.
Yeah.
Number 40. I thought it was, I thought that would have been like the biggest of the 3, but apparently the title track Abacab was, which I've got no problem with that. I love the title track. And then 2010 Hall of Fame inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They definitely had it coming, and everybody. Gabriel wasn't there, not because they were fighting.
Right.
So this is not a Chicago,
no,
whatever, Blondie, Van Halen, all those other ones. Gabriel wasn't there, but it's because he couldn't make it. It was scheduling issues.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, everything was okay. Everything's okay in Genesis land. They're okay, right?
Yep, in the forest.
Yes,
with the elves and the woodland creatures and what
the Slipper Man.
The Slipper Men, yeah.
So let's talk about this. like we said, this goes way back, although I don't recall. And I don't know if you did either. Did you hear it upon its release, or was this something?
No,
We were still kind of, you were still kind of dipping your toe into the prog thing. I think you were bigger into the Who at this point.
Yes,
in 81.
I didn't hear Abacab until 82 actually, and I think it wasn't long before Three Sides Live came out.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a twofer for me. I got to hear the studio, Abacab, and then that tour that they released with the extra tracks on the fourth side, which was a studio side when it was released in the US.
Yeah.
3 tracks that didn't make the album Abacab were put on there with 2 other tracks from Duke. The UK version, for some reason, has another live side. So I don't
4 sides live.
I don't get that.
That's because they released the songs that didn't make it on Abacab.
Yeah.
In the UK were released as an EP called 3x3.
That's right. And
which did really well. That was kind of like a,
as a matter of fact, I bought that first.
Yeah.
Because they used to play Paper Late.
Yeah.
And you might recall on the radio, like on NEW, I heard it like every day. And I was expecting it to be on Abacab, and I was disappointed that it wasn't, that neither song was on it. I was just like, oh man, but the album itself was great. And I loved it. I fell in love with it on the spot.
Yeah. And that was the point in our relationship, we'll call it that, our friendship, mm-hmm. right? Where we were both, we were both exposing each other to different things.
Yeah.
We didn't necessarily grow up liking the same things. We got into, we kind of introduced things to each other and then got in, it was kind of like tennis, kind of volleying these things back and forth and see what stuck. Never got too much into the Who, but got into Genesis and really mm-hmm. enjoyed that, and Phil Collins, and then I lobbed over, I'd lob over ELO or I'd lob over something else,
mm-hmm.
And then we would kind of meet in the middle with those things and kind of find the common ground.
Yeah.
Which was the great thing. I was thinking about it a lot, especially in listening to this album of, where did I come in? And it was probably after you, obviously, because you were the one that kind of introduced it.
Yeah.
So I would say maybe early 83, somewhere around there. So it had already kind of, it had to have been before their follow-up album was called Genesis.
Right, self-titled.
It's just self-titled, so it's going to be confusing. So it was definitely before their next album came out.
Yeah.
Right? Part of this conversation has to be the Phil Collins solo releases were in between each one. And I definitely got Hello, I Must Be Going came out after this. Mm-hmm. And I definitely got that when it came out. So I can absolutely pinpoint mm-hmm. that at that point I was already kind of into it. And get it and listening to that, because I remember buying the cassette of Hello, I Must Be Going and be like, wow, okay, I really dig this. So yeah, there's some murky chronology in there. I'd have to go back and look and see when Hello, I Must Be Going came out, because that's really the time when I was like, oh, okay,
82.
There's new stuff coming out.
Yeah.
It was 82?
It was 82. Yeah.
So then, it's got to be 82 then. All right.
Yeah. It was like I said, 82 was the year that we, I got, not only this, but also the Peter Gabriel, his
Which
third
one?
album,
Okay.
the Melt album, because Phil played on that. I found out, and that's where the that fantastic drum sound came from. It was born on that record,
mm-hmm.
and that came out in 1980, the same year as Duke came out. So between those 3 years of all these releases, I kind of got them all at the same time.
Yeah, you had a treasure trove of
exactly. I was
the main group Genesis, and then the 2 lead singers, the former lead singer and the current lead singer, also putting out stuff. So it was a great time for someone to be alive, meaning like just finding that, just getting into that group. Then all of a sudden you've got all this new stuff.
Yeah,
that you could sink your teeth into, and all of it is different.
It is.
And that's also the beauty of this is the
it's
Gabriel
eclectic.
stuff was not like what Genesis was doing at the time.
Right.
And the Phil Collins solo album was also decidedly not what Genesis was doing at the time, even though he was a part of Genesis. There was still that split line where they were able to manage that, because they were still co-writing. The Genesis stuff would be co-written, to keep it on an even keel and to keep the ideas flowing. It wasn't just, oh, Phil Collins comes in, does a solo album, and then he writes everything for Genesis. It wasn't like that. It was collaborative on the Genesis front.
And it most certainly was not. And one thing I will point out, if you listen to Abacab, you would immediately assume that that's the case, because the album is drum heavy. That's really, they based all the songwriting around the drums. And it was Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford who were like, it wasn't Phil. They're the ones that said, we want those drums right out in front. And so, yeah, I could see somebody saying, oh, that's a Phil Collins record, because it's just so prominent, and his vocal, and, he's like,
he still wasn't Phil Collins yet, though, either. I mean,
no, he wasn't.
Value came out, and it was a modest success. At best, it was a modest.
He surprised everybody with it, yeah.
Yeah, but we look back at it now as a classic. It's like, oh my God,
right?
Face Value, like, wow. Back then, it kind of, In the Air Tonight was an FM rock radio hit. Wasn't this big thing. So he can return to Genesis. And they can reconvene, and there was still that safety zone of, oh, I did a solo album, let me fall back into my group. And that's really what the dynamic was then. Yeah. Because he hadn't become Phil Collins. And they had, it's funny you mentioned the drums, right? Because they were all, like, Tony Banks was getting into using drum machines to kind of work stuff up and sequencing and kind of working that stuff, and then getting those ideas down, and then go ahead and, because they bought their own studio, so now they were able to record. If something wasn't working, they didn't have to throw it away necessarily, because they were using studio time. They could work ideas out. If it didn't work, they would eventually ditch it. But when you're booked on studio time, you kind of have to work quickly. And if this isn't working, you got to chuck it. Because you got to move on to the next thing. You don't have time. Right. Now with their own studio, they had a playground to flesh out ideas and try different things. And
they could work up the day and then say, call it a day and say, okay, well, we got tomorrow, and, whatever, we'll just come back to it. It's funny, when you mention drum machines too, it's like you would think that a drum machine would be used in like a demo or something, but they used it to great effect. I mean, they actually used it in the finished songs, like of course, In the Air Tonight, and Man on the Corner, and there's, but it's and it wasn't just Phil. But they all loved it. They all, and Mike Rutherford would actually use it. He's the one that came up with that great sound in the next album with Mama. That was Mike. That wasn't Phil. Again, it wasn't Phil. That was Mike Rutherford coming up with that, that weird, whatever it was, that droning thing.
Beat that
relentlessness of the drum machine is what they loved about it. And it kept it. And they were doing things like looping too, which was like, I hadn't really done before. Everything was much more epic and layered and put out there. So they decided to scale back the sound, strip away all those layers, and then you had this really simplistic stuff going on. And it was just, but to me, just as inventive. It was odd. It was just some odd pieces, and I loved it from the start.
They had started that process with Duke. I mean, Duke had kind of earned Genesis a lot of goodwill in surviving, the exit of Peter Gabriel, then the exit of Steve Hackett, who was a longtime member of the guitarist,
guitar player. Yep.
It's kind of like, okay, how many more people are going to leave this band? So they were at this point that it was kind of like, okay, are they just going to wither away, like wind and wuthering away? Genesis joke number one. They weren't sure. Critics are, what's going on with this band? So when they reconvened for Duke in 1980, that they had started thinking about, and it came to full bloom in Abacab, with consciously making songs that didn't sound like old Genesis. Like that, they went into the studio saying, if we start working on something and it's got tambourines in the chorus, or it starts to sound like something from Genesis, we're chucking it.
Right.
So this was it wasn't like, oh, we're going to try and be country, or we're going to try and do this. It's just like, they just said, we're going to do whatever it's going to be. But as soon as it starts to sound like something we used to do, we're going to stop. Which is a very interesting challenge for a band, because you're not throwing away your legacy, but you're saying, we want to do something different from it. And we're conscious of that. We're conscious.
Yeah,
we're going to consciously, if something gets too overblown or bloated, we're going to stop and figure out a way, either throw it away or figure out a way to reconfigure it. And you get the same thing that Rush, I can't stop thinking about Moving Pictures. Their aesthetic was the same thing, as we want to shorten this stuff. We want it to be punchy. We want it to be tight. and Abacab
Exactly. Yeah. And it
blows it out of the water.
It was a response to punk too. It was sort of like the new wave thing was coming. They knew the landscape. They knew the soundscape. You know, they knew what they had to do, and they did it. So that's like, okay, so they invented this stuff from the ground up. It wasn't like old ideas that were just hanging around, and they came into this entire album was just invented on the spot, pretty much. They just, and it didn't sit well with obviously a lot of the purist, the pure Gabriel fans and stuff. I had the advantage, though. It was for me to get into this album first, and then I could go back into their catalog. So I really enjoy both, sides of Genesis, and the progression of each album is just a little bit more different and getting there into more pop territory. Unlike other prog bands, which I had gotten into already, like Pink Floyd, I knew, their stuff. And of course, their stuff was better in the 70s. Yes was the same thing. 90125, they tried to do that. It's a great album, but everything after that is kind of, not so much. But here it was like, right out the gate, I love this. Yeah. But let's see what you got, in the past. And of course I was just like, this stuff is great too, man. It's just,
albeit very different, right?
The prog guy in me was loving it. And I was just loving the fact that this was the same band, it's just so,
that was amazing. Able to, and it literally was one thing with Gabriel.
Yeah.
And then, when he left, they kind of, do we continue with that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what Genesis is going to be, or is Genesis going to strike out and forge a new identity, as it were? Not totally foregoing all that stuff, but changing it and adapting to it. And and you're totally right. You kind of get the best of both worlds, and both of them are good.
Yeah.
Or great. Either way.
And they cultivated a whole new audience too, as a result. You had a lot of people who were just into the pop stuff. They don't know Gabriel. Like, what is that? Like, they play in their shows, they play these long extended like medleys of the old material, and people are just like, huh? I don't know what I'm hearing here right here. It's just, yeah. I remember we went to the that concert, and
Madison Square Garden.
I had already been acclimated to it, so I knew what to expect. But I had gone with a few other people too, like the following night, and they were just dumbfounded. And they were like, I don't know what this is, like, because they were expecting.
They were still early. Yeah, that was their. Yeah. That was their. We saw them on their self-titled The Genesis tour, so they were still kind of
right.
mining a lot of that older material, to supplement that kind of stuff too, and weren't afraid to go back into the catalog,
right,
and bring out some of that stuff that is probably better performed live than listened to. Where
I totally agree with that.
It's kind of free form, that kind of stuff. No That's doubt. Where prog is. It's made to kind of be performed live.
Yeah.
Then you can riff off of things. It's got a lot in common with jazz, because it's kind of that free form. Let's see where it goes. And
they were brilliantly able to take bits and pieces of like these long like songs and just stitch them together to make a medley. But you would never know that this was, you would swear that this is the same piece. Like it's a piece, one long piece of music, but it's like bits and pieces from all different songs. Like the In the Cage medley is, to this day, I mean, that version on Three Sides Live, God, I love it. I love it. You get Daryl Sturmer and Chester Thompson. I mean, Daryl Sturmer is a formidable guitar player in his own right, jazz fusion based. I mean, he's really going at it in some of that old stuff, and he knows exactly what to do and how to tackle it. And it's
so tremendous. Genesis would supplement their band on tour with Daryl Sturmer on guitar, who was primarily known as a jazz guitarist, which is great because he brings the right chops and right sensibility. And then Chester Thompson on drums. When Phil, sometimes they would play together. They'd play songs simultaneously.
Oh, goodness.
And then when Phil would come out front, Chester Thompson would take over the skins for that. And both of these gentlemen would also be part of Phil Collins' touring band as well. So he was working, with people that he felt familiar with. So let's get into Abacab.
Yeah, let's do it.
This album, I mean, this song Abacab, the title song, just starts like this album. This album just starts, and I really, that's what, when I hadn't listened to it in so long, and Abacab and the song literally just starts. It's like there's nothing, and then this song is just off and running, and it really kind of gets you psyched. It really sets the table for what you're going to get in this album. And probably my favorite song off the album. Okay. If not one of the top 3. I just really love it. It's just got everything. It's got, the great thing about Phil Collins on this album is he was still doing different things with his vocals.
Yeah.
He was still, that prog thing with experimenting and almost becoming different characters.
Yeah.
With your voice. He was doing it on this album. So you're going to get, some different looks throughout the album, but his vocal on Abacab, I just really like it. You're getting a song and then you're getting a prog ending. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. They don't put it in the middle. You kind of get Abacab, the song, and then you've got this instrumental section at the end where they kind of go with it and it kind of fades out. So you don't really hear stuff like that too often. Even back then, that would be in the middle. There'd be this big middle thing where they'd go off and then they'd come back and pick you up. With Abacab, you get the song and then you get the bonus at the end.
And the song means nothing. The lyrics mean absolutely nothing. When we talk about getting into music, this is probably one of the prime examples of that, being so young that we were. The music is really what drives it. Those drums, the punchiness of it, and lyrically, it's like, to me, if it's like a whole album worth of Yellow Submarine. It's like it's like every song has that kind of feel to me.
Well, they get very proggy. The lyrics get very proggy as
these songs. Yeah, they mean nothing, like, except for maybe a couple, like Phil. He wrote "Man on the Corner," which is, of course, you know what that's about. But it's like, I love the nonsensical feel of the album, and just the idea that this is a band just doing their thing, and there's nothing controversial about them. There's no politics. It's not important. They're just having fun. They're just doing their thing. And that's what I love about it. It was all about the sound of this record for me, and just the way they approached it. And like you say, with Phil's vocals, probably the strongest, in my opinion, his strongest vocal album of all the albums they've ever done. It's like he had a strength.
Like growl. He gets a growl in there. He gets some weird different vocalizations. Mama, when they did Mama on their next album, that was more almost campy.
It's smoother. His voice
they definitely were leaning more towards pop. So this is like Abacab was the perfect placement for Genesis.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about the title. The word Abacab and the title Abacab basically is a reference to when they were writing the song. They had different sections, so they would have section A, section B, and section C. And as they were arranging these little sections in the beginning, when they wrote it out, like section A, B, it was A, B, A, C, A, B, Abacab. Now that ended up changing later on. It was more like A, B, B, A, C, C, it kind of got a little more complex, but Abacab was the original, like when they were writing out the sections for this song that had no title. So they called it Abacab, and they called the album Abacab. It doesn't mean anything. Like Eric said, it's kind of like a red herring. It's like, what is Abacab? It's not anything.
It means nothing.
It's
like the studio.
It's the sequence of the sections of the song. It just happened to form a word, and it became a word. So that kind of should tell you right there. It wasn't. I guess it was done tongue in cheek, because they're not taking themselves so.
Well, so, I think the key word
groups always take themselves so seriously,
but I think the key word here, I think Tony Banks said it best, and he said that the album is like it serves as a more of an abstract feel. It's almost like it's simple, but deceptively simple. You know what I mean? Like it has those hooks, but you just need to look. You know where to look for them, but it's like but it's just much more. It's like looking at a simple painting, but yet you're trying to find a deeper meaning into it. And there may be something there, but it's not there, but
at least not by the artist, right? You may find something deeper, but it wasn't put there by them. And you get, oh my God, I forgot. And I think Eric, before we did this episode, Eric was talking about the remaster, the 2007 remaster, which you can find on Spotify. I think that's the only version they have right now. And Eric was like, do me a favor, listen to the 2006, because I said I was going to listen to it on vinyl because I have the vinyl. I have an original vinyl. So I'm like, I'm going to listen to the vinyl. And Eric's like, well, listen to the remaster and let me know if it sounds like the guitars are more forward, Anything like that. And I said, well, was it remixed or remastered? And he said it was remastered. I'm like, well, usually if they really toyed with it, it would be like it would have to be a remix. So I went and listened to both. But what I really got out of the one on Spotify, the remaster, is the monster fucking bass playing by Mike Rutherford on No Reply at All. Holy, I mean, it's always been there. But when I was listening to it again, I'm like, Jesus Christ, how did this guy why wasn't he playing more bass like this? Because you would think that this was and I wanted to look at the credits again. I'm like, I got to make sure they didn't get a funk bass player like to come in, like Alfonso Johnson or somebody like to come in and play this.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like something that the bass playing sounds like something that would have been on face value because it was more funky.
Right.
And that's what Phil Collins was going for. And the fact that Mike Rutherford could replicate that and those bass lines. Oh my God. Yeah. No Reply at All. Wow. Killer track. Now, whole new respect after really, like I said, the bass was always there, but in that remaster, you really feel it. You really hear him go to town on that thing.
Yeah. A very underrated player. Yeah. I know he's known for using like bass pedals on stage, like that heavy, like, boom, boom, for effect, for like the old stuff. It's like that real pompous, like cathedral like stuff, but here, the funkiness of it, he's great. He's great. I would argue that he's probably a better bass player than he is
than a guitar
player. I think he uses guitar, I think more for patches or just sort of layering like little, sketching out things.
Yeah. Like licks and
because Steve Hackett was primarily the lead guitar player at the time. But however, I say that now, but then I'm thinking of then there were three. There was their first album, which was just a trio. I would urge you to listen to that album just for the guitar work on that and the bass on that album. He does some fine guitar work on there.
Very
as well.
Underrated. It's very easy for Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks. Mike Rutherford is on guitar and bass, as we've just described, and Tony Banks does all the keyboard work. Very easy and these guys are very low key, nondescript people as well.
Oh yeah.
So it's very easy for Phil Collins to take up all the oxygen in the band. Yeah. Because these guys are just really low, it's like the Doors, right? It was like, okay, Ray Manzarek and Robbie Krieger, those guys were so low key that Jim Morrison was such a force. It's the same type of thing. No Reply at All would also mark the presence of the Phoenix Horns. Okay. So we start to see the magnetism of Phil Collins' solo work start to kind of pull in a little bit. But it was what was needed.
Well, he said he was going for, that's what the song is a funky groove to it to begin with. Why not? Why can't we use, this is a direct quote. He's like, why can't we fucking use Phoenix, horns on our stuff? There's no reason why we can't. It is the first time that there were outside musicians playing, I think since the early days, like the first record or something, they had like strings. Which they've never
very
done
judiciously.
Since.
That's the key.
Yeah.
He would become known for really overusing it in his solo career. Like that would become, those Motown roots and the soul music influences would really come to bear on his solo work. And he became known for that. And I guess Maurice White, famously from Earth, Wind and Fire, kind of, not too happy that Phil Collins kind of took the Phoenix Horns from. They were part of Earth, Wind and Fire. That's what that was the horn section.
Well, to be fair, nobody
absconded with them.
Yeah, but nobody liked it either. So I think there was it wasn't too favored by fans either. It was like, oh, what's this horn stuff? Like they said that when they played on that tour in Amsterdam or something, like every song from Abacab got booed because they were just so used to the old stuff, but and especially the horns, which they didn't use live. They didn't bring those guys out.
Yeah, probably Tony Banks probably played it.
But people were outraged by it. They were like, "What is this?" So it wasn't. I mean, it was critically favored, but a lot of people, didn't like what they were doing.
The Genesis purists are prog people, right?
Yeah.
Peter Gabriel, that like the people that at that point there was 7. I think there was 7 Genesis albums with Peter Gabriel, and this was only like the third one or fourth one in without him.
Right.
So the scales were still tilting towards, well, this was still Peter Gabriel's band. And he, most of their catalog was that type of music.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then you get a band that's trying to change directions. Yeah, there's going to be a segment of fans that are be like, no, you know, I want that stuff. That's what I gravitated toward, was the quirkiness and the weirdness and the, you know, the stories and the performance.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're kind of morphing into, you know, getting away from the theatrics and really kind of morphing into more straight ahead, like rock performance band, where they're on stage performing the songs, not acting out the things. And it,
Right.
they're not portraying stuff. You know, they really got away from that pretty quick.
No costumes. Yeah.
And
Right.
so I could understand where there's audience members that are like, no, this is just not what I came for.
It was a whole new
just
dynamic.
Like more fans would be like hearing the old stuff. I don't know what this is not like the same thing. This is not what I came for.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So,
exactly.
So you're trying to serve two masters at that point, right? You're trying to keep the old fans engaged, but you're trying to also grow a new audience and also be true to the changes you're trying to make here, right? Because like we said in the beginning, this was a conscious choice for them to not continue to do quote unquote Genesis style music.
Right.
You know, and they were fully aware of what Genesis style music was and said, when we, you know, like I said, when we hear that, we're going to stop because we want to do something different. And they literally forced themselves, not out of desperation, just because they were changing.
Because they knew,
You know?
well, they knew they had
want
to
do something. Yeah, let's we gotta, you know, we're a different band. We're not the same band. Most of the band was gone by that point of what Genesis was.
But the thing of it was too, was like nobody forced them to do it. Their management didn't tell them, hey, you need to do this, 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 and this, which, you know, was probably true of other bands of the day. But no, they fully went into it themselves and made those decisions on their own. And that's commendable. That is, you know, that's not easy to do, to make those choices. And, you know, I always, you know, they were always the most successful, I think, at it, you know, from the prog era, you know, to do this, you know, and to have just a whole new career. I mean, in the 80s, they just took off with the pop stuff, and whether we like it or not. And, it didn't matter because they were, you know, Invisible Touch was their
biggest,
like, you know, their biggest hit.
Yeah.
You know, and they, you know, they're very proud of that effort. I'm not crazy about the album myself, but hey, you know, like I said, they cultivated a whole new audience with that record.
Yeah.
So
they absolutely did. You know, it's funny. This album has 9 songs on it. And I kind of, when I was listening to it today, I kind of got, I picked out like a little thing here. You know, it almost seems like they're almost in pieces of 3. You know, like the first 3 are kind of the more poppy stuff. The next 3 are kind of like the really proggy stuff. And then the last 3 are kind of like the little more the mellower stuff. You know, because once you get past, you know, No Reply at All, Me and Sarah Jane, you get into Keep It Dark, which is, oh my God, you know, I just love the, you know, that's got that repeating riff. It's one of those songs. It's just got the repeating riff. And yeah, it's a story. It is a story. So it is a little more proggy. It's a little more quirky. And then it leads into Dodo/Lurker, and you're at the side when you start side 2, you're into prog territory.
Yeah, that thing is just,
but it is great.
It really is.
I love it. You know,
it really is.
It's epic. It's bombastic. They really go for it, but I think
it's absurd. It's ridiculous. But it's
they
great.
hit it.
Yeah,
but they hit it. You know, it's like. I could almost, and as I was listening to this album, a lot of times, let me ask you, I was almost imagining, I was like, I could almost picture Peter Gabriel singing these songs. They weren't that far out from something that he might be singing at the time as well. You know, obviously No Reply at All, no, but some of this stuff like Dodo, Lurker, and Keep It Dark, and you know, I was kind of like, you know what, I could almost hear Gabriel singing this kind of stuff. It was it still had those those tinges of that.
I think Total Lurker for sure.
Maybe because of the way Phil Collins was singing his voice, because he wasn't singing it like Man on the Corner and Sussudio. He still had that bite and that growl in his voice. He was still kind of inhabiting the songs in a different way, and it made me think. I was like, wow, you know, this would have been interesting. This album would have been interesting to hear Gabriel tackle.
Yeah, I you know.
Because it's got some meat on its bones, this album.
I do. I definitely see Dodo Lurker. I don't know about some of the other stuff. But then again, you know, when you look at an album like So, like we just talked about, the sort of pop sense of that record. And I think you're right. I think, he definitely could do most of the songs on the record.
Only because of again, it was Phil Collins' vocal performance that was really just kind of he didn't sound like Gabriel, but he was doing those different things.
Well, he was doing those inflections on Go to Worker. He has that weird like he changes the tone of his voice. It goes down an octave, and then
and then he would sing a line really low, and then he would sing the next line regular. So he was like. Really, those were really performance songs.
They were telling a story there.
Yeah.
And what the story is, I have no clue. Because again, it's just absurd. It's just nonsensical.
Fishy got a hook in his mouth. Fishy got problems.
Yeah.
Right?
When I first heard this, I thought for sure they say Darth Vader and it's Dog Vader. Darth Vader, agitator. I thought, but it's Dog Vader. But that's even worse. Like Dog Vader. What the fuck is that? But it's great. It's just great, and it shows the humor too. There's a little bit of the tongue in cheek, especially with Phil, because he brought that to the stage too. It's like he knew how to like project that out. You know what I mean? To do that stuff without having to wear makeup or costumes or anything like that. It was like a show, almost a show tune in a sense, like, because it was just so.
Yeah, he had those sensibilities.
Yeah.
He had a very comfortable, even though he was the drummer and then became the lead singer, he had a very comfortable stage presence. He wasn't, he didn't shy away from it. He didn't have to really, it didn't even seem like he had to grow into it. It seems like he was, he was already built for it, just waiting for the opportunity.
There's definitely a lot of Beatles presence, in that sort of like, again, you think of that period of the Beatles when they were just writing songs because they were on drugs, and I guess that's what they were going for. Is this that kind of flavor, just to be able to write a song like that and just throw it out there and just be and absolutely mean nothing, and they knew it, and they're not afraid to admit that. Even like Who Done It. Now, this is probably.
I was going to get there, but you did it first. So
no, wait a minute. Now when we saw them live, you love that. So this is probably folks. This is probably like the worst song they ever did.
It is.
It is so bad.
It is horrible.
But it's at the same time it's funny as hell. Because they knew what they were doing. Tony Banks is like, I came up with this weird like thing, and Phil wrote these like stupid lyrics to it, and it's the most grating.
It is annoying.
The most like annoying song probably ever written, and it's just
I have three things to say about it, and tell me if you agree. Right, three things to say about Who Done It. Yes, number one, we agree it is a horrible song, and probably on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, I think it's the equivalent to Mother from Synchronicity. By the Police, right? It's the same type of thing. It's like, what is this song doing in the middle of this album, Mother?
Right.
Andy Summers is screeching and screaming, and it's the swirly thing, and it's like, right? It's like the same type of thing. It's like, why?
Yeah.
There's number one. Number two, they put this in instead of Paper Late.
Yeah. Or you might recall.
Really? Like Paper Late? Like you put this song in instead of Paper Late. You're like, at this point, it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, okay. Yeah. All right. Go with it. We're going to go with it. The third thing that came to me and I listened to, so much came to me listening to this album. I think it's a palate cleanser for the final three songs, because this song Who Done It is so busy and it's so like grating on your nerves that when it ends and Man on the Corner starts, it is such a silent song.
I love it.
I think the noise wall of Who Done It, as soon as the noise wall, because it is a loud song, as soon as it ends, you're actually bathed in silence, and then Man on the Corner starts very feebly.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost like a palate cleanser, almost like, because the last three songs are kind of a little more mellower. And I think it's almost like and that's why I say the album's almost like in three parts. You've got the poppy stuff, the proggy stuff, and then at the end is kind of like the album closing stuff where it's a little more sedate. It's not bombastic. It really kind of it's almost like a gentle landing. And it hit me when I was listening to the album, on the vinyl. I'm like, oh my God, please. Like, I didn't want to get up. But then when it ended and then Man on the Corner just gently started, I'm like, wow, it's very cool. Like all of a sudden it was very quiet.
Yeah.
In
it gets
the area
serious.
I was listening. Yeah. Like in the area I was listening to, it got very quiet. And I don't know if that was their intention, was to really like grate on your nerves, but then give you something so subtle afterwards that you really can enjoy the silence of the song.
Yeah.
I think
and
that,
I absolutely love Man on the Corner.
Yeah.
I might even go as far as to say, and you're going to be shocked to hear me say it, but I think I like it better than In the Air Tonight. I think so. Maybe it's because In the Air Tonight is so.
It's definitely a cousin. They share some of the same.
It has the same feel. It's the same approach.
DNA. Yeah.
But when he gets going and the drums kick in, and it's not the famous fill. See what I did there? Drum fill.
I was gonna do that earlier, and I didn't. And I said the bus left, so I'm like, I'm not gonna go back. So I'm glad you caught the next stop.
But when it's just that simple like crack of the snare, and it just
impactful,
man, and then the vocal on top of that. And that's it. That's the song. There's really no. Mike is. You hear this like sort of guitar, but I think it's like looped backwards. I think I could swear that
just a weird like and the weird keyboard like squishy.
The keyboard
like,
is just so. That isolated keyboard is what sets the mood, and it's so simple, but yet so great. That could be one of my favorites off the album for now. Like back then, might not, maybe no, but
I think back then it was very popular. Like, I remember hearing Man on the Corner on like classic rock.
Yeah,
at the time, like from this album, I remember like Man on the Corner was like the thing that like WNEW from the local rock radio station in the New York area played. Mm-hmm. I don't maybe No Reply at All. I don't really remember hearing Abacab as a song on the radio. But that was the one that hit the highest, and Man on the Corner did the poorest.
Yeah.
But I remember that song was just like, was the one that you heard like those deeper cuts that we always talk about. And then the album kind of ends on that similar type of note, Like It or Not and Another Record are just they kind of bring you back down from the experience, and
yeah. But they're not. But they're good songs.
Yeah,
Another Record I love. I always love that one. I love the way it closes the album out, and it's not very favored by fans. It's like, oh, that one's a dud. I don't agree at all. I just love the,
put Who Done It against anything, and
well, who told them to put it on there was Ahmet Ertegun. He
wanted it as a single.
He's like, no, put that on there. You guys got to put that on, because they were just so like into it, like because they knew it was so bad that he's like, no, you definitely need to leave it on there. But I was like, but not to have You Might Recall
or any of the
or Paper Laid, Me and Virgil. I mean, those songs are great too. And certainly no B-sides in my opinion. It's a sin that they're not on the record. It would have made the album that much better.
And it's funny because I was also thinking about when I was fuming in my mind about why Paper Late wasn't on this album, why Who Done It was. I began to think, and we've been talking recently about how music today isn't so great, or what what's going on with music, da da da. And I think one of the things it came to me. I don't know. Tell me if you agree, but because of the limitations of the format at the time, right? The main format was vinyl.
Yeah.
You couldn't, nowadays you could put out stuff digitally, or when CDs came out, you had a lot more storage space, right? A lot more space. So people would put out albums with 15 songs on it, right? Or nowadays, since it's digital, there are no restrictions. But back when vinyl was the prevailing format and cassettes matched it, you only had a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
So you had to choose your best stuff. You had to be really judicious about what you were going to put on this album, because you only you couldn't just say, oh, well, we've got 10 good songs, but we want to release 15 because we've got room on the CD.
Yeah.
And it made me think a little bit. I was, did artists have to have more discipline with either what they were creating or what what they were creating, but then what they were selecting to put on there. Do you agree? Does that make sense? Does what I'm saying make sense to you? Like how I'm explaining?
No, I think there is something to that. You always hear artists say, "Oh, it was so torturous to let that song go, and we wanted it on there so badly." But it's all about the sequencing too, right? I mean, like you pointed out. I mean, who done it is horrible, but it does serve a purpose, and especially on that side
to make you love the rest of the album.
When you're dealing with that proggy like Dodal Lurker, and then that follows that up, right? And it's like right in the middle, and then like the album closes with these these nice little ditties, but it's just I'm into this guitarist Derek Trucks lately, and he
lately
like
what, since last week?
Well, no, since probably 2006. And,
okay, I don't think that qualifies as lately.
But I think he said it. He said it best when he said that their new project is a 4-part album. Because over the pandemic they recorded like 24 songs, and to sit there and listen to all of that in one sitting, it's just impossible. It's 2 hours worth of music that you had to. So they decided to release them, a month apart. And he said he cited like albums like Axis Bold as Love by Jimi Hendrix as like it was only like 38 minutes long, and he's like, this is the way to digest an album. And I think he's right. I think the single albums, the 9-song albums, like we pointed out, New World Record, this album, it's like, this is the way to really dig into this stuff, and if there are extra tracks that you can find, you got that as well, so you can go ahead and
I think it challenges you. I think you become challenged as an artist, except in the case of like we just did our episode about Chicago, who just released 4 double albums in a row. And they just did the hell with it. Yeah. we don't care restrictions, roads where we're going, there are no roads. It's like we're just going to put out double albums for the first 4 until we run the tap dry, and then we'll consider. They're the exception, not the rule. I have another question for you, and I thought about this one.
While
I was washing my dishes today, I was like, I've got a question.
What's with this domestic stuff?
Okay, so while I was washing dishes today, this question came to mind. Is Dawn better than Palmolive? No, that's not the question.
If I had to answer, I'm going to go with Dawn.
I'm going to go with Dawn. Always me. You're soaking in it. That's Palmolive. Here's the question I came up with. Is prog a sustainable long-term genre for a group? Because this is the second episode we've done about a prog group that said we need to shorten our songs. We need to embrace a more pop-centric sound. And then you mentioned, and we've mentioned in previous episodes, Yes, who did the same, took the same type of roadmap to lesser success.
Right.
And I'm not trying to slam prog or drag prog, but it just seems like these bands just kind of almost are like, okay, we've done it. And there are obviously there are exceptions to the rule. King Crimson, Jethro Tull, I'm sure ELP, but they didn't really continue on past, they didn't have a long shelf life anyway. But it seems like a lot of the bigger prog bands at some point start to pivot.
Yeah, I agree, and it's the knowing how to do it, I guess, is the because I think in the case of Yes, now they're back to that sort of like back into their own little corner, still making albums that I have no idea. Like there's so many albums out there that I've never heard, and I did choose to listen to a few tracks, and they don't do it for me. It's just not quite the same. They're just all right. Hang it up, guys. I mean, I don't know what you're going for here, but they're not looking for. No, they're not. I mean, they have an audience. They still have that solid fan base, but I don't think that they're they don't really have anything left to prove in that sense. They're just continuing to make music, which is great. And I think we talked about this in we just did Ozzy Osbourne, so we
the viability or the legacy bands.
You're like, I think like our friend Andy pointed out, he's like, you're gratified that these artists are still making music, but we don't necessarily have to like it to say, hey, good for you guys. Like, I'm glad you guys are still in the game, so to speak.
But it's to be on their side.
But to be fair, I mean, there were bands like Marillion. Look at Marillion. They came out. They pretty much started in the late 70s, and they hit it really big in the 80s. But they were Genesis, but Genesis of the 70s period.
They picked up where Wind and Wuthering left off, or
if you listen to their stuff, man, that guy sounds just like Gabriel.
Yeah, he did.
Like the
Fish.
Like way Fish.
That's
back,
the lead
way
singer,
back,
not the group.
Yeah.
And
they were writing songs and doing stuff musically that they did back then, but somehow the songs were still short. They were still much more, streamlined and 3-4 minute songs. But they did it. They were successful at it. So, there are bands out there that know how to do that, but they're not huge. They're not really selling a lot of records and such. So there is, I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
Who is selling a lot of records these days anyway, though? I mean, right? I mean,
true.
What genres, who knows? Is prog even a genre?
Well, I mean, it's I think
outside of the legacy bands, Well,
there's so many variations of it too. You got metal prog, you got, some of these other, I would say that, bands like Tool and bands like even 9 Inch Nails to a certain extent, I think there's some prog in that stuff. It's not just metal. I think there's a lot more going on there than just, thrash metal or, that kind of stuff. But, and even Ghost, we talked about Ghost.
Metal prog.
There's definitely some of that in there as well. That those theatrics, those, that's what I'm thinking of when I see this guy on stage with the black makeup and the mask. I'm thinking of Gabriel. I'm not thinking of like metal. I'm thinking of what Peter Gabriel was doing.
Absolutely, the performance aspect that Gabriel brought.
Right,
he was inhabiting those characters and changing.
That's right.
Although in Ghost, the guy keeps the makeup on for one thing, Gabriel would inhabit different characters throughout the show.
That's right.
Right, come out with costumes. The red dress and the fox hat, and then fox mask, and then be something else. It was
the brilliance of having the advent of having a 20-minute like long extended instrumental piece. He can go
to the bathroom, call his wife, and change. And play a game
back out in the dress and the fox head. Yeah.
Oh boy. So, okay, so what do you got for top tracks here? Obviously, Man on the Corner is your number one. And all these songs. The great thing about this album, all these songs were co-written by all the members of the band except for 3, and the 3 was written by one member each. So that's kind of a neat thing again about Genesis, is that they still, really tried to keep it together. And, have it still be very democratic, which I really liked that they were able to retain that and kind of not that they needed to keep Phil Collins in check, but that it was, they still kept that aesthetic of, okay, we're going to go in as a group, and they didn't tend to even on the subsequent albums didn't tend to bring stuff in. And let's get together, let's work stuff up and see what happens. And
I'm going to argue this point, and I think I probably mentioned it before, but it was a very a band decision. This was, Phil did not take over this band. I'm going to say that, it's like people can't tell the difference. A lot of people are like, oh, the solo work and that. No. It's still, Tony and Mike still had a very big, in fact, that they were more of the leaders of the band than Phil. I mean, Phil was just becoming a songwriter at this point. So they gave him, they said, okay, so what do you got? Let's see what with Duke, there was a couple of misunderstanding, and then Please Don't Ask. That's kind of got him on his way. Mm-hmm. He swears up and down that he showed Tony Banks In the Air Tonight. Tony Banks said, no, you never did, because if we would have used it had you done it. So I think Man on the Corner is probably that response, maybe, whatever. But Phil wrote that song. This is his song. Tony wrote Me and Sarah Jane. And then Mike was Like It or Not.
Yeah.
Was, because it has that rolling guitar in it, so you could definitely tell it's a Mike Rutherford. And it almost, you could always tell, this is what he's going to be doing with Mike and the Mechanics down the road. I could tell that's sort of, but what was I going to say? My train of thought.
Favorite tracks after Man on the Corner?
Man on the Corner. Oh my goodness. Keep It Dark. No Reply at All What I especially like about that one is the bridge. You know, where it slows down and Phil is like really, you know, and it's and that lyric right there is a really great lyric. It actually is saying something. You know, there is some, you know, and I think he did write that lyric. But yeah, I love that, those three songs, and then of course You Might Recall is probably one of my favorite songs by them.
Doesn't count.
It doesn't count, but damn it,
it's
you know, I wanted to be on this album so much because I just love the song so much, and it just
woulda, coulda, shoulda,
but there it is. Yeah, but I love the whole album.
Yeah, it is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like I said, Keep It Dark is actually about an alien abduction, right? Family man reported missing. It is. It's about a guy that kind of gets abducted and not sure if he should tell people about it. And so yeah, I kind of, oddly enough, I'm going to be surprised. I'm going to surprise Eric. It's the proggy stuff that I kind of like. Is Abacab,
there you go,
Dodo Lurker, and Keep It Dark are the stuff that really punchy.
Those hooks
moving
are great.
Stuff too. It doesn't overstay its welcome, even though some of the songs are, even though Dodo Lurker is longer, it's just got a grand scale to it, and it's just such an interesting song that it keeps you in there, and yeah. So that's, you know, mission accomplished with this. Like, they really kind of wanted to do something different, but not totally different. It's not like all of a sudden have banjos and mandolins. It's like we're going to do stuff. We just want to be conscious about what we're not going to sound like. You know, we don't know what we want to sound like. We just don't know. We just know what we don't want to sound like, which is an opposite thing. Usually artists are going for a particular, I want to sound like when we did Born to Run. It's like, this is going to be Roy Orbison meets Bob Dylan, you know, kind of thing. This is Genesis is adding by subtracting, and saying, well, we know we don't want to sound like this. So anytime we do, we're going to exit.
Right.
You know, exit out, and then whatever we get, which is very, very kind of an interesting way to make an album. And you get something that makes no sense a lot of times, but it doesn't need to, because the musical ideas that are there are just so tangible, and the vocal performances are really what, like, you know, I think it's probably his best vocal sounding Genesis album.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Because after this, they got into, you know, Illegal Alien, which has not aged well on their follow-up album.
It has not.
You know, That's All, which was you know, Light FM radio ready for Light FM. You know, they had, you know, Home by the Sea and Second Home by the Sea. So there's still some prog stuff on the self-titled Genesis album. But I think on this album, he's still, you know, he's got one foot in his solo career, figuring that out, and he's still got a foot in Genesis. And you're getting the best of both worlds on it, I think. You know,
I think, you know, I kind of look upon this. Yeah, I kind of look upon this album almost like an experiment in a sense, but it's a little bit. It's not. You know, it is a little bit more than that. It is a solid record. There are established songs on this album, but I kind of, you know, it kind of reminds me of Revolver in that sense. It's a band that is like trying something new, and right down to the sound of the album. You know, just this is an album that does not, you know, it didn't sound anything like what they previously did. Even Duke had another producer on it, and it still sounded like the old stuff, the old way of recording. It had that, you know, a little bit more raw sound to it. This was like full on, like those drums. Oh my God, I can't understate those drums, the sound of those drums on this record. It's what makes the record for me.
And it weren't the overblown. It wasn't the overblown stuff like you'd get in I Don't Care Anymore, which would, like, his Hello, I Must Be Going would be right on top of this. Again, I love that. I love that for what it is, but you don't need it in every song. So, you know, and it's his drum work is just used to the right, everybody, the musicianship. It's just a full on package, just really well put together music.
Yeah.
And the fun thing is when you listen on Spotify, you can look at the lyrics and you can kind of see they're kind of those proggy story lyrics. And like some of it doesn't make sense. And what is this about? And, you know, ask the fly on the wall. Okay. I'm not sure what I'm asking him, but I'll ask the fly on the wall. But again, it's about it's more performance pieces. That are really well constructed and really fun to listen to. And a little bit of that not too much of the bombast. So it's not going to be like, I don't want to, you know, I don't like proggy stuff. There's enough there to kind of keep you, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. So
that's a great way to put it. Yeah. It's easy to listen to. It's a very simple sounding album, but yet it's so great.
Yeah.
And just the sound of it alone is what I love about it. the production on it is just great.
And for anybody, as we close out, we're gonna make one sadistic request. Is that when you do listen to it, do not skip Whodunit. You need to actually listen to that song to get past it.
Yeah.
To really enjoy the next 3 songs that come. So we really dragged it and said what a hard, and it is really, it's not a great song. It's just not
but I think it's their response to punk. Yeah. It's not unlike what, well, I'm going to bring it up, get ready to get the bell ready. But it's not unlike what Lindsay was doing on Tusk, just not full on punk. It wasn't, recreating the punk sound, but there was their idea of punk.
Yeah, it's very avant-garde as well.
Right, it's just so strange. Grating, and the drums on it.
Oh, grating.
The drums on it, it's just like and especially the way it closes out, like, it's just like he's hitting a kettle drum or something. It's like crazy.
And it's that final. It's like,
But I remember though, when we saw them live, you were hysterical laughing when they performed the song, when he was wearing the friggin' goggles and the stupid like snorkel. Like,
I don't even remember. I was probably dying.
He was standing on top of the amps.
I don't remember. I mean, I remember the concert. I don't remember that part. But
yeah, he was wearing he was wearing goggles with like a snorkel thing, and I think he was wearing fins, if I'm not mistaken. And I have no clue what that meant. But the song was so ridiculous, but we loved it though. It was just hilarious. It was part of the show. Yeah.
Yeah. So. See, it was like, why are they doing this? And I probably was facetiously laughing hysterically, like, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this. So that's going to do it for this episode. Let us know, was my hot take about prog music, is it long-term sustainability? Let us know. Leave a comment on Facebook or Instagram. And tell us how you feel about it. But by all means, check out Abacab. This is such a great album in an era, the 80s, before that second British invasion came and the sound of music really changed. These guys were really on a path, really at this point, trying to carve out their own identity. Mm-hmm. And then the superstardom was on the horizon. They just didn't know it yet. For this was still a band feeling their way out and figuring out what the future held for them. So by all means, check out Abacab from Genesis. It's such a great album. And that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. Like I said in the beginning, here's our second ad. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram, won't you, at 3324 podcast. And then also on YouTube, we've got the new videos or the new versions of old videos or new uploads. Mm-hmm. You can check out those old ones as well and see us make really stupid and geeky faces while we talk about music and movies that we love. So for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will see you on the flip side.